Good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into the most important news stories from the United States and around the world. So grab a coffee, sit back, and let's get started with today's top headlines. From the United States. First up, the Federal Reserve has decided to maintain its benchmark interest rate at a 23-year high of 5.25 to 5.5% following its two-day policy meeting. Fed Chair Jerome Powell emphasized that while inflation has moderated from its peak, it remains stubbornly above the 2% target. The committee remains highly attentive to inflation risks, Powell stated, adding that they need greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward their goal before considering rate cuts. This decision means Americans will continue facing high costs for mortgages, auto loans, and business borrowing well into 2025. Shifting to politics, newly elected members of Congress are arriving in Washington, D.C. for orientation sessions this week. The political landscape remains finely balanced, with Republicans holding a narrow majority in the House and Democrats maintaining control in the Senate by just 2 seats. The incoming freshman class includes several progressive Democrats and Trump-aligned Republicans, setting the stage for potentially contentious battles over government funding, border security, and foreign policy when the new session begins in January. In a landmark legal development, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, a case that could fundamentally reshape the power of federal regulatory agencies. At stake is the Chevron deference doctrine, which since 1984 has required courts to defer to federal agencies' interpretations of ambiguous laws. Conservative groups have long sought to overturn this precedent, arguing it gives too much power to the executive branch. Environmental and consumer protection groups warn that eliminating Chevron could cripple the government's ability to address complex issues like climate change and food safety. Turning to technology and cybersecurity, a massive data breach at TransUnion has potentially exposed the personal information of over 160 million Americans. The breach reportedly involved sophisticated social engineering tactics that compromised employee credentials. Cybersecurity experts are describing this as one of the most significant breaches in history, with stolen data, including social security numbers, credit histories, and driver's license information. The FBI has opened an investigation, while state attorneys general across the country are preparing class action lawsuits. And finally, in some positive economic news, new jobless claims fell unexpectedly to 215,000 last week, the lowest level in 4 weeks. This suggests the labor market continues to show remarkable resilience despite the Fed's tight monetary policy. The better-than-expected data pushed stock futures higher, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average futures up 180 points in pre-market trading. However, economists caution that the full effects of higher interest rates may still be working their way through the economy. Now, let's turn our attention to the top stories from around the globe. Our top international story comes from the United Kingdom, where Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing his first major rebellion since taking office. Some 45 Labour MPs have signed an amendment rejecting his government's welfare reform bill, which would tighten eligibility requirements for disability benefits. The rebellion threatens Starmer's working majority and represents a significant challenge to his authority from the left wing of his party. Downing Street has called emergency meetings to negotiate with rebel MPs ahead of tomorrow's crucial vote. Over in Europe, EU leaders are gathering in Brussels for an emergency migration summit as arrivals across the Mediterranean have surged to their highest levels since the 2015 refugee crisis. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is demanding other EU countries take mandatory quotas of migrants, while French President Emmanuel Macron is pushing for increased border security funding. The European Commission has proposed a new crisis mechanism that would allow for faster deportations and increased resources for frontline states. But deep divisions between member states continue to block a comprehensive solution. In the Middle East, a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas has entered its 3rd day, with both sides indicating they're open to extending the pause in fighting. Today saw the largest exchange of hostages and prisoners yet, with 13 Israeli hostages and 39 Palestinian prisoners released. Humanitarian aid trucks have been entering Gaza at increased rates, though UN officials warn that the current level of assistance remains insufficient to address the territory's catastrophic humanitarian situation. Egyptian and Qatari mediators are working to extend the truce for additional days. Moving to Asia, Japanese electronics giant Sony has announced a $10 billion investment in artificial intelligence research and development. The company plans to construct a massive new AI research campus in Tokyo that will employ over 5,000 researchers and engineers. Sony CEO Kenichiro Yoshida stated the investment aims to position the company at the forefront of next-generation AI applications, particularly in gaming, imaging, and entertainment. The move represents Japan's largest single corporate investment in AI to date and signals Tokyo's determination to compete with American and Chinese tech giants. And our final story today comes from South America, where Argentine President Javier Milei has unveiled his law for the reconstruction of the Argentine economy. A sweeping reform package that includes the privatization of 41 state-owned enterprises, sharp cuts to energy and transportation subsidies, and significant reductions in public sector employment. The announcement triggered immediate protests in Buenos Aires, where thousands gathered outside the presidential palace, chanting against the measures. International financial markets have responded positively to Milei's announcement, with Argentine bond prices rising sharply, though domestic analysts warn of massive social unrest as the measures take effect. That's all for today's comprehensive news coverage, folks. Stay informed, stay safe, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next update. See you tomorrow for another round of important news.